So in this lesson, we're going to talk about making tonal adjustments to an image using levels. Now, when I say tonal adjustments, what's important here is I'm talking about values. I'm not talking about color adjustment. So in this photo, there are a lot of things that we need to correct, but before we do any retouching on the photo, what we need to do is correct the exposure and make some adjustments to the density of the photo. And if we bring up levels, Command L will bring up levels, you can see this is the information on the histogram. And as you can expect, there is not a lot of shadow values in this image. That would be here. Remember, the histogram shows us tonal values from 0 to 255. And you can see from about 0 to, 80 or so, there's just nothing. There's just nothing there. There's no shadows virtually at all. So before we start processing the image, what I want to do is take out all the color. The yellowing that you see here is just a sign of aging. It's just the chemistry of the photograph that has changed throughout the years and given it this sort of yellow cast. We don't need any of this color, so what we're going to do is take it out. The very first thing we want to do is make a copy of the background so we have the original. And then from this background copy, we're going to come up here into Image, Adjustments, and Hue and Saturation. And we're just going to drop out all of the saturation, giving us just a black and white image. If you hit Command L, that will bring up levels, and from here we can see the histogram again. We can see that it lacks shadow detail. So what we want to do is bring this in just a little bit to bring back some of that shadow detail. And you'll notice that as I do that, it starts to kind of crush the shadow areas. Now we want to do it just enough to where it starts to give the image some shadow areas, but we don't want to completely block up the shadow areas so that we have no information whatsoever. And a good way of showing what is being thrown out when you do this is if you hold down the Option key and you pull it, you can see this changes into just a black and white image here, and it shows you the areas that are black are the ones that are sort of being thrown out. I want to do some of that, but not a lot. Okay, that looks okay. And now we'll do the highlight detail. Now there is highlight detail in here, but is it of value to me? Would it be of value to throw out this highlight detail for the sake of a better looking overall image? Probably so. In this image, there just isn't any detail, so why not? So what we'll do is we'll bring this in. I'm gonna hold down, I'm gonna bring it in first so we can see what we're doing. So that's kind of what I wanna do with this. I wanna just add a little bit more brightness to the image. I don't wanna completely lose the highlights. But then again, there isn't a whole lot of information there to begin with. There's noise and that's about it. If I hold down Option, I can see what I'm getting rid of there. And this normally would not be a great idea because if there was a sky or clouds or whatever, I would essentially be clipping out those highlight details. But because there are no details here, I can do this and it's not that big of a deal. And so if I want to make just a little adjustment to her face, I can pull that in just a little bit to give her face some contrast. And her face kind of falls into this area of the histogram. It's a mid-tone. And so I think that looks pretty good. So I'll go ahead and click OK. And because I have my original still, I can hide the new layer that I've created and I can look at the difference here. Okay, and again, that's making tonal adjustments using levels. Let's look at this other image. Here we have the same kind of problem. It's a very flat image, it lacks density. The majority of the information in this image falls into the midtones, which is here in the center. So what do we want to do? We want to add a little bit of contrast here, maybe some darker shadow detail, and maybe brighten up the face a little bit. So we can start with the highlights or shadows, it doesn't matter. I'll start with the shadow areas. I'll dial in the shadow areas to where I want that to be, and dial in the highlights to where I want that to be. You'll notice the more I go with this, the more it's clipping in these highlight areas. So if I click OK, this information's gone. I don't want to do that. Again, if I want to see the effect on the highlight or shadow areas, I would hold down Option. What is totally white is the areas of the image that are being thrown away. So this is another one of those images that there's just not a lot of information in these extreme highlights. So I can throw out some of that information and be okay. Now, when I do this, anything to the right of this, this pixel information is going to be gone. The same with this pixel information. So essentially what I'm doing is clipping the image in the highlights and in the shadow areas. I will go ahead and add a little bit more density to the midtone areas. So I'm bringing some more shadows kind of into the midtone areas where her face is. I click OK. Looks good. I'm going to come back up here and turn this. Well, first I'll make a copy. I should have done this in the beginning. I'll turn this to black and white by taking the saturation out of the image. And I'll click OK. And there we go. Looks pretty good. If I go back to the original, before and after.